All kinds of technical issues tonight. Welcome, everybody, back to Wednesday Night Mythic Conversations. We got a very exciting episode. We're fashionably late this evening. I saw somebody say that we are making up for the early start today on Four Horsemen o'clock, so we'll just go with that. We are talking Figura Obscura tonight. We are talking Red Death, because that is obviously the big news that just dropped this past weekend. And like we have done for some recent Figura drops, we did this with Monkey King recently. I brought none other than Eric Treadaway on to the show to talk about Figura Obscura, which, as if I didn't like Figura Obscura enough, the fact that I also get to wrap it in with a Wednesday show where we get to talk about this stuff, that makes it even cooler, right, Eric?
That's right. Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much for joining this evening. I did like, while we were trying to get our technical issues straightened out, I did in the comments put it's Eric's fault, but we'll forgive him. And I like that Curtis said Eric is probably still recovering from having to hang out with Chris.
Well, hopefully my performance will be a little livelier tonight than earlier today. I was just at a certain point, I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, like, I should probably not be here anymore. But then it was weird to just get up. So
yeah, it's definitely awkward. It was a lot of fun. If you missed out on the afternoon show today, it was equal parts more ridiculous and sillier than normal, but also more organized and, you know, more, I don't want to say more fun because it's always fun, but it was a great show. It was their 2-year anniversary. So a lot of members of the Legions community sent in videos. Eric was on live. CB was on for a very short time live. Yeah, that was definitely a lot of fun. Look forward to that. So I love Figura Obscura drop weekends. I've talked about this when we did do the Monkey King. I mentioned that these drop weekends are some of my favorites, and Figura Obscura some of my favorites because it really does show kind of like the full studio team working on these, from obviously the figures themselves to the stories to the photography to the art. It's really that full package. What is really interesting, I think, about this one is I did a show this weekend and I mentioned that you and I have this running list of potential Figura Obscura candidates. And there were a number that we talked about for this particular release slot. The Masque of the Red Death was not one of them. That kind of came out of the field. Talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about how you got the inspiration, like how the idea to do this particular character, rose up and you decided this was the one to do.
With Figura, I think I've talked about this before. There's a lot of thought goes into it. We have the list that you mentioned. I love looking at the speculation, when we reveal one, people immediately start posting suggestions for future releases. And there's just a lot of elements of just Figura that are just fun. And it's just every step of the way, there's a lot of excitement, whether it be the concepting, the packaging, the release itself, across the board. And so just for me personally, when I'm working on these figures, like the basic requirement for me is that I need to be really inspired, like just excited about it. And when we were talking about doing one for the Halloween season probably about, this time last year, I was actually to the point where I was thinking maybe we should just skip that release, because I just nothing was inspiring me. There were some that I want to do, but that were, there were time constraints to do something as complex as I wanted to do. And so there were a couple that we've been talking about, but like you said, yeah, the Masque of the Red Death had never even been discussed. But it was a story that has fascinated me for a long time. And it was really just like one of those lightning strike moments where it popped into my head. It just seemed like out of nowhere. I mean, it may have been a week, 2 weeks before the sculpting started on it. So like my excitement was very fresh when the development came to be. And so it was just like the perfect, the perfect storm of inspiration and timing, and just availability of certain parts to work with. So it's just like, I don't know. It just, everything just kind of fell into place at the right time and at the last minute. And it just, once the idea popped in, I was so excited and just ready to go with it.
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned that we started talking about this, around this time last year. I mean, just saw some comments here, people talking, like Curtis saying the excitement surrounding Figura Obscura speculation, reveal, and then immediate fulfillment is absolutely intoxicating. I hope the formula never changes. We really like this formula as well, especially in contrast to what we do with the pre-orders. But on the back end, on the development side, to get these to be in stock items, to have them in for certain time periods, it does mean that we have to start these things so much earlier, which it's interesting because by the time that they actually get revealed, we've been living with them. Like, we've known about this for quite some time. So there's always a burst of relief, I think, when we get to do a figure reveal. But once we get to reveal these, I think that's also a reason why it's so special, because we can finally exhale. We can finally tell people about it and share it. And that's pretty exciting because we do live with them for a while.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, it's, if we're talking about general concept discussions happening, around this time last year, and then there's the sculpting, there's the printing, the painting, packaging work happening, artwork, and just work in general happening on the mugs, the shirts, the pins. It's something that it's not like we just knock the sculpting out on it in October, November, and then forget about it for the year. It's something that, we really do live with it for the year. It's pretty, it's a pretty consistent engagement with the project.
And they happen at different stages. So the sculpting and obviously all the paint and all that happens well before the packaging design. So it's almost like you get those two bursts of creative output on a figure. You get that initial, the figure creation and everything, but then you get Nate tackling all of the artwork, which is really, really cool. And I have to imagine that that's something you enjoy a lot, because your part's already done. So you can almost like sit back and enjoy that next part of the creative output. Obviously, you're providing feedback and direction and everything. But I know, seeing from my perspective, seeing Nate work and then, getting those first sketches and then seeing the fleshed out renders, it is absolutely such a joy to be able to see that stuff come together.
Absolutely. I mean, really, when it comes to the packaging, I really do just sit back and watch. I like something else that we worked on that I've been working on recently. I did give some input on, but I'm very reluctant to, because like I've enjoyed seeing what Nate has come up with, because like a lot of the fun of Figura is going in and doing the research.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's a deep dive project.
It is.
And I do it on my end, and you do it on your end with the writing. The painters go in and do their research on it, and then Nate does the same thing. Like Nate and I talk about this. Our research experiences are very similar. Mm-hmm. And so, but it's cool though, because, he's creating the scene and creating a cast of characters that may surround the figure. And so he's exploring different avenues of the material than, that I might necessarily be looking at, especially, this is a very short text. So there's, I think, we all, once you read it a couple of times, it pretty well. Whereas, like Monkey King, it's so dense.
Oh yeah.
That that one he pulled out, it didn't look like I pictured it in my head. Mm-hmm. He pulled out different elements of the culture and story that, I hadn't crossed my mind or wouldn't have gone with. So it's, yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a pleasure to just at that point sit back and become, a fan and an audience member. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that it's cool.
It's fun to see too. I mean, just comparing those two releases, the fact that for Monkey King, from an artistic style, that he went with, being influenced by like Chinese watercolors and tried to bring that kind of element while it's still very clearly being Nate Bartsch artwork. How gothic and moody this package is with all the blacks and reds. I mean, the only color on this that, that's not the parchment and back really are the windows, which is great because, that is such a striking aspect of the story, is those 7 different, rooms in the Prince's Abbey that have the different color windows. So I love just being able, because I'm a fan of Nate's art, as you are as well. So being able to see him play with different art styles on these packages is also really just a joy as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like, you're kind of, each one, you're really going on a different, like, kind of winding journey on each one. And, mm-hmm. The world of Masque of the Red Death is a very different theme and a very different place than Monkey. And so, it's fun to see him, flex some different creative muscles, and he's having fun with it as well. So it's it's just cool to see the enthusiasm. It really just shows.
It does, for sure. And so this was one, and I mentioned that with Monkey King, I was not familiar with Sun Wukong before we did that figure. A lot of all the write-up and everything, that was all research that I had to do for that. So I loved it from that perspective because it was a character that I was introduced as well. With this one, I certainly had read this short story before. I reread it a few times, as you mentioned, to familiarize myself, but I'm very familiar with Edgar Allan Poe. Being from Rhode Island, Poe has a connection to Rhode Island. He spent some time here in Providence. When you do like ghost tours around the Halloween season, talking about Poe and the time that he spent in Providence is a very common topic. So being able to explore kind of that particular author's world was very, very interesting. But even doing the research for the write-up and digging more into Poe and some of his catalog and some of the stuff, like the fact that many people can consider that he created the detective fiction genre. You know, the fact that his Murders in the Rue Morgue came out like 50 years before the first Sherlock Holmes story. That stuff I found all fascinating, and I love being able to share that. That's one of the things that I think is so fun about these, and such just a happy accident byproduct. The amount of people that are enjoying the characters as toys, but also being introduced to these characters in these stories at the same time. That's something we've never really talked about, wanting to like educate people with this line, but it's happening, and that's really kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, there's, especially when you're talking about, you know, these subject matters that we're tackling here. I mean, we're talking about literary masterpieces, or, you know, we're talking about, you know, folklore and legends that have withstood the test of time. Like they're, so, you know, there's an importance there and a quality to it. And so, you know, like there's that feeling that you get when you discover something like that for the first time. And, you know, even at the ages that we're at, you know, there's still discoveries to be made. And, you know, the intention is not necessarily like educate people. Like you said, byproducts, you know, perfect word for it. If that happens, you know, if they discover something new, that's great. You know, here it's just like really, you know, kind of exploring passions. But yeah, like, I mean, if we can, you know, bring something that we've enjoyed to as something new to somebody else, then that, you know, that is a great, you know, a great bonus for these things.
Yeah, and I mean, we got a comment from Dorklear here, and you know, Dorklear is an educator, and he says the community learning and reading experience that Figura Obscura sparks is amazing. And I mean, the decision to actually include the short story in full as, you know, a mini comic in the package, you know, that was something that was really a byproduct of us wanting to, you know, mix Nate's artwork with the text itself. But the amount of people that are teachers who thanked us and commented on that, and the amount of people who had never read it and were genuinely thrilled that it came with that booklet, that was, again, another happy surprise. You know, we did it because we thought it was pretty cool. You know, we were like, hey, let's size it like a mini comic, like the old, you know, Motu figures and stuff. So the fact that that became a bit of a hit and people are excited about getting that's one of the things that really excites me about this.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the length of the story worked in our favor here. You know, if we were to try to do this with Journey to the West, you know, just the shipping price alone on that would kill everybody. But yeah, like you know, I remember working on some concepts like back in our early days of Four Horsemen. It was well, yeah, this is, people know about it, when we were working on the concepts for Symbiotech. And you know, the idea with that was, you know, it was an action figure game thing, and part of what we were thinking about a lot in that, and it, you know, it's a, you know, a thread that continues through to today, and I think it probably goes back to like Masters of the Universe mini comics or Superpowers mini comics, or even the idea of G.I. Joe vehicles where you took it out of the vehicle and took it out of the package and you spent an hour putting it together and stickering it and stuff like that. Like the unboxing of the figure is so much of the fun of figure purchase. And so the more you can draw that experience out and make it more interactive, just that piece just becomes more and more of a joy. And so I think including something like this, especially where, if whether you already know Masque of the Red Death or whether you're being introduced to it, if this is intriguing to you, you want to know more. So if you can open up that package and immediately start diving into it, and then of course Nate's art's in there, and there's so much to enjoy. I don't know, it all leans into Figura Obscura as like an event type release. And so it's just, it just plays into the special nature of the release. We talk about that list, and there's so many possibilities. And so of course there's a temptation to do more figures. But I do think that, that's a fine line, and something that we're very protective of, is that if you start just, releasing ad nauseum, then it's going to lose that special quality. And so, we don't ever want to be predictable with it, and we don't want to, to kind of ruin the magic.
Well, and I've said this before. One of my favorite things I remember early on talking to you about was when you said, if you're struggling to sculpt a Figura just to hit a checkbox to hit a deadline, you're doing it wrong. You even said it a minute ago, where we almost considered skipping this particular one because you were not being inspired for this particular release. I think that's important, that there's that passion behind it, that it's not, like you said, something that we're just pumping out to, pad out the line. This is an event type release that is going to be, sporadic and infrequent, but impactful when it happens.
Right. Yeah. It's perfect summation of it. I know it would be disappointing if we did less in a year, but the quality and the spark has to be there. Absolutely. But hopefully that won't happen. I would rather skip one and do an extra one the next year, if all the inspiration hit right, rather than just trying to keep them even.
Absolutely. So talking about things that are included, I've got on the screen right now kind of what this figure includes. One thing that really people reacted to positively was the addition of the large clock, for a couple different reasons. Knowing this particular story, there's very few accessories that would have made sense for this. The clock is an important part of the actual story, so that did make sense. But coming on the tail of the Ox Crew wave, which included our first little diorama accessory set, and then now seeing a diorama style piece in here, people are really getting excited for those type of pieces in our potential releases. Right out of the gate, when you were thinking about this, did you know you wanted to include that clock?
Yes. One thing that I really like about this, and it's just you can't do it every time, but I love the concept of a little self-contained scene. It becomes more of a sculpture that way, or you know, like a, I don't know. It just becomes more than just a figure that way. And I especially like it when it's something where it's like the diorama type pieces or set pieces are an object rather than the idea of putting a figure on a base with a backdrop. It's just, again, it's more sculptural. And so, you know, this one it was just the perfect, you know, the perfect scenario to do this. And, you know, one of the things about the story and about Poe's writing in this piece is that it's very minimalist. It's very bleak. And there's just this looming sense of dread. And just, I love the descriptions in it. I love the use of color, which, you know, again, like the way that Nate took all of that and put it into the packaging. And I think it you know, it worked here in the figure as well. And that's in kind of my point with the minimalist part of it is that in regards to the clock is that, you know, it's Sun Wukong, like, you know, we were able to throw in multiple heads. You know, we included a peach. You know, I got a spare set of shoes, like all this other stuff. Here, it's just the character needed to be the character. You know, throwing in some extra hands is cool, but there really wasn't that much else to put in. And so it was a great opportunity to just put, you know, a real, almost like statement accessory with him. And it just, I don't know. It just, again, it's one of the, like, when it comes together, it comes together. And it just worked here.
Absolutely. It's funny because I was doing the live stream, one of the live streams this weekend. And as I mentioned, I've seen this figure for a year now. I literally didn't realize, I knew there was a raven on top of the clock. I didn't make the connection to the poem, The Raven, until this weekend when someone pointed it out and it just like clicked. And I was like, I loved it even more. Just that little sculptural detail. I was like, that's super cool when someone pointed that out. But yeah, I mean, big accessory like that, diorama. Also the base, you know, doing a base for a figure is not something we've done previously, but all of that just seemed to work so appropriately for this figure.
Yeah, the base was fun to do too, just because it's almost like a more of a graphic element. But you know, even just looking at the way that photo looks there, just seeing it on that black backdrop, like it's pretty, you know, it's striking. It worked the way, you know, it could have gone many ways and not worked how we had hoped, but it did, you know, and it's you know, it's a pretty simple piece. Like it could have tried to put more details into it or whatever, but again, it's more of a graphic approach.
So I'm going to bring up another graphic here. So obviously this is the figure. This is a particular figure that obviously has a fairly large reliance on soft goods. CJ did a wonderful job with all of these layers. We'll go back and talk about the soft goods in a minute. But one of the things that I think is also very interesting with this figure is what's under the soft goods. So, you know, a number of people, it's funny because Trevor and I talk about that. You've got to take every possible shot with these figures because the Legionnaires are so knowledgeable. They're so inquisitive that whenever you release something, they want to know every aspect about it. So we knew they were going to want to see what was under those robes. And it made sense to show them because this is important. This is something very, very new. this full zombie-like build, we've done zombies, recently in Necronominous Wave, but giving us the lower limbs of the arms and the legs that aren't armored, this is a very different type of build for us that fans are very, very excited about. So this uses some parts from characters like Poxus, and then a number of new parts. What's new here? The torso, some of the, like I said, the lower legs.
If I remember correctly, so it's been a year now. Yeah, the torso, lower legs. I think the lower arms.
Yeah, because Poxus has gauntlets,
and the zombies do as well.
Yeah.
And the kind of skirt and loin. And we've shown the loin since, but it was actually done for this figure.
Yep.
So it's kind of funny just with doing the combination of pre-order pieces and in stock drops where something like that can happen.
Yeah. You start to see stuff. They get sculpted for Figura, but then people see it in other stuff because it's now part of the library. So we don't want to not use it. So in a case like that, it's fun to know that it showed up earlier.
Right. Then that could happen again moving forward. So, but usually in a way where you could never, that loincloth was in no way going to give somebody a clue what that was going to become.
No.
But
good question here. Just go back to the clock for a minute.
Okay.
Was there any significance to the face on the base of the clock?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like as specific as the Raven, but it was kind of a nod to Prospero, and just the opulence of the party and the elite that he had surrounded himself with. So, just this kind of, just the face itself kind of more as a little nod to Prospero, but again, like the ornate detail and kind of like filigree-ish style detail was, again, more to just, again, that opulence and the money and
sure,
opportunity that was extended to the members of the party.
Okay, excellent.
But I think one of the things I was going to say, though, going back to the body parts, and as we were saying earlier about how the inspiration just struck, and it just seemed like everything fell into place. And then this was another spot where it did, because Necronominous, the sculpting was just completed on that, whatever, late October, early November last year. Then we had basically that, took us right into Legion's, the Legion's Con weekend.
Yep.
And so having those zombie parts developed, the feet and the hands and all that stuff, it also just, at that point, I was already in the mode of working on this stuff. Like, it was fresh. And so to go in and just continue the job, it was perfect timing. And it just everything just kind of came together, and it was great.
Yeah, it's great when it does work out like that. So back to the soft goods. So this is when you do the soft goods, and I know the answer to this. I'm asking for the audience. You design these as part of the sculpting process, even though these are never going to be, actually produced in the factory like the injection molded body and all that. You do get a sense in the design, so you can share that with CJ to actually recreate those as soft goods. That's one of the things that you did here, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Because it's like, I don't think the way we work is, the way a lot of people traditionally work, in that we don't spend a lot of time on design drawings. A lot of the designing's done in the sculpting.
Yep.
And so, sculpting out those robes over the figure, it's just part of the design process, really. It has its disadvantages because, I have to get to a certain point on the sculpture before I can really start giving direction to CJ. But it also, the advantage is it's fully visualized. And so there's a lot less room for interpretation or a lot of unnecessary back and forth trying to figure out what trying to explain something rather than just figuring it out and sharing the image.
Yeah.
And this is a complex piece of soft goods here. And so yeah, and it's different layers of fabric, some different actual fabric types in there, some just distressing. It's asymmetrical in multiple ways, but man, like, he came through like a champ with this thing. Like, I'm amazed every time. But this one, it's essentially, it's a soft goods covered figure.
Yeah.
There's very little sculptural detail showing, but the soft goods are so dynamic, they're so textured, they're so attended to, that it's just the final look is so perfect and so rich that it really just it is just cool. And it's with the wiring and all of it, and the sewed in seams and all that, like there's just there's posability in it, and which there's a dynamic look with it.
Yep.
So it's it's cool, and it's fun to see, like, people when it gets photographed, just like the what you can do with those pieces, and the movement you can get out of both the figure and the soft goods to just create a very compelling scene. Which, there's Trevor's shot there. It's gorgeous.
Not to take anything away from CJ, because the work that they do is incredible, but we also have to acknowledge what a wonderful job the factory's been doing, translating the designs and the patterns that they create onto the final figures. That we've all seen toys that in prototype form look wonderful, and then the final product is, doesn't meet that standard that was set in the prototype. The factory and, what Chris has been doing over there with production has just been nothing short of amazing. This figure, opening this thing up and seeing these, robes and comparing them to the prototypes that were sent originally, absolutely fascinating, stunning work with these.
For sure. That was one of the biggest fears going in initially, with moving into, heavy soft goods and, the tailored soft goods, is that, absolutely, like, every time you see a hand sewn prototype, it's gorgeous. Yep. It's perfect. Everything lays how it's supposed to, but can the factory match it? Now, again, just to see Jessam, as a team, like, that's very much to their credit as well, because not only is there the prototyping, but there's all the pattern making. Yep. And there's, which is usually a multi-page PDF with everything specced out. So it's as spelled out as it possibly could be. You know, there's the PDF, and then there's fabric swatches and all that. So, but even with that, you know, with that much guidance, it still is remarkable that they can do such a wonderful job. Even to the point I was looking, one of the figures I was very nervous about the factory translating into production was Poxus, because the fabric had a lot of washing in it and stuff like that, and so the paint in the fabric was helping to almost sculpt the shapes in the fabric. And I was like, well, you know, I don't know if the factory can match this up, but you know, I'm very happy to say that you know, I had the most recent Poxus sample in hand, and it looks like a prototype. Yeah. So, you know, and this one is another perfect example. Like I said, I mean, the majority of the figure is covered in these robes, and it leaves nothing to be desired.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this one here, the shot that I have on screen right now, this is actually the first shot that I saw from Trevor. And you know, he sent me, actually, was this the first one? Might not have been, now that I think about it, but I always ask Trevor, because this is a landscape shot, and I always ask Trevor, you got to get me some landscape shots, because a lot of the stuff that I do for like the website and everything, they really need those land. So I remember when he sent me this, he just kind of dropped it in my, you know, chat, direct message to me, and this is the one. It's the one that we used primarily for the marketing on the website, not only because of the landscape. This is my favorite one. Just that turn of the head, the outreached hand, everything about this one captured just the creepiness of this particular character.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, just the lighting, the use of color. And I like you mentioned with the head being turned, you know, if this wasn't soft goods, you know, that shot wouldn't be happening. So it really does allow to do some great things on these robed characters. You know, I still think back to the like a, you know, I don't know, like a Toy Biz Gandalf figure. And like, you know, it's the whole thing where you'd have the elbow, and then you'd bend the elbow, and the hanging fabric is like shooting out to poke somebody in the eye. So it looks good in one pose, but it can be awkward in others, where this, you know, it really allows for everything you need. And the wiring's a big part of it, because recently I bought a figure that had soft goods on it with no wiring, and realized how spoiled I've become.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. I mean, soft goods on action figures are one of those kind of polarizing type things. There are some people that love them. There are some people that hate them. I've gone on record and said that I didn't really like soft goods on figures. I preferred, I mean, you know, I came from the old McFarlane days. I liked the big dynamic sculpted capes. But it wasn't until Corn Boy turned me on to Mezco, and then we started using more soft goods and seeing what CJ was, you know, prototyping, that I really came around. But I like to tell people all the time, it doesn't matter whether you fall on, I love soft goods, I don't care for soft goods. They are a tool in our toolbox that we use when it's appropriate. You know, we're not moving to every single figure is going to have soft goods, but when a solution makes sense for soft goods, we're not going to shy away from it. That if it's the right solution, it's the one we're going to use.
Absolutely. And I mean, for me personally, I don't even know if it's you know, a debate between soft goods and not soft goods. For me, it's about, like, I'm just a big fan of mixed materials on a figure. Like anytime, like, we can use real rope or real chain or you know, metal rings or anything of that sort of the fur that we use on everything.
Yep.
Like I really enjoy that because I just feel like it's, I don't know, just another level of visual interest, as long as everything is properly scaled, properly
Yep.
seamed. If you're using like a metal chain, like if you've got a figure that's like a filthy weathered looking figure and you put bright silver chain on it, then that doesn't work. So it's also a matter of handling it a certain way too. I don't know, some people just, it's not their thing, and it's never going to be their thing. And I of course respect that. I've gone through many kind of phases myself, because that thinking back to the McFarlane days, it was the sculpted detail. Like I was so into it at the time. Like I like enjoyed the challenge of trying to sculpt sculpt a cape as opposed to putting soft goods on it. Sometimes you have more control over it in certain ways. Like even actually, if you look on this particular character, that entire skirt and loincloth I went with sculpted as opposed to soft goods. Just mainly because there's a very specific look that I wanted out of that I don't think we could have gotten the exact same result with soft goods. Yep. And so they can coexist.
No, absolutely. It's funny when you mentioned the mixed material. One of the things that I immediately thought about was the upcoming Calizaire figure, the Jin from the Poxus wave, and something as simple as the fact that he's got like metal rings for his earrings. Like that little touch, that little mixed material that's in there, I think adds so much.
Yep. Yeah, and even like CJ and I have had some discussions before about what's especially cool, and we did this some with the with Monkey King even as well, but I know we were thinking about it a lot with the wizards in the Poxus wave. The idea of having a sculpted figure, soft goods over the top of the sculpted figure, then sculpted pieces back over the top of that. That kind of that layered look, and where it's a melding of the two, is like that creates a very exciting look.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. So look at this really quick. Talking about the event aspect of Figura Obscura, one of the things that I know we love internally, and we've been very fortunate that the Legionnaires have enjoyed it as well, is all of the extra goodies that get to come with these. And that's cool because when we're doing Mythic and Cosmic, we're so focused on the drop. And yes, we've done shirts. Yes, we've done skate decks recently, but they're kind of after the fact. The fact that the shirts, the pins, the mugs, these are all part of the drop itself is something that I think is really, really fun. And I would hazard to say that the extras that we put into this particular drop for Red Death, I think are the best ones we've done so far.
I agree. I think especially as a full presentation, I think it's the most cohesive group. I think the color concept on it. I think the fact that it's really the most graphic set to date, just with what we're able to do with this type of mug as opposed to what we've been doing. It's somewhat minimalist. So I just think it all comes together really well. It's just bold, and I don't know. It just yeah. I mean, I think there's been some individual things that we've done in the other releases that have been great. But this one, it feels very unified.
I really like the mug we did with Father Christmas. I like this. So this is a metal mug, by the way. The fact that this is a different style mug, like you mentioned, that the colors on it, the stark contrasts, I really do like that a lot. And I mean, the pin just looks cool. That mask, it's one of those things that it lent itself so well. Like Father Christmas, I love Santa, but Santa Claus's head is not going to make as cool a pin as the Red Death mask. I mean, that just looks cool. You look at that shirt, and these are great pieces.
Yeah. Again, it's just, everything came together again. Yeah. Even with what we've learned here, the next one, 2 from now or whatever, it might hit a great figure that really resonates, but it might not work as well on the additional parts, where there may be some where the additional merchandise part of it might be more compelling than the figure. Yeah. Who knows? Like it, but yeah, it's cool. We're just about to turn over into October, so it's just the time of year is right. So to see this this dripping red typeface on black, like it's, I don't know, just it hits just right.
So I will point out a few logistical things. The shirts themselves, those are still available now. You can get those from retroragslimited.com. Of course, you can also, if you go to storehorseman.com, right at the top, there's a tab that says apparel. That actually just links right over to Retro Rags. It allows you to basically buy any of the Retro Rags shirts kind of right from the Store Horseman interface, essentially. So if you want one of the Red Death shirts, you can get that. An announcement that we made earlier today during the 4 o'clock show, it might have gotten overshadowed a little bit because we did it right at the front before we got into the silliness, was that we are going to do another very small drop of the Red Death figure and the mug this coming Friday. So what we had said was that we had a small number of cancellations that were people that basically accidentally placed 2 orders, like 2 of the same order. We didn't cancel any orders on anybody that didn't ask us to do so, but we had a few people that said, hey, I made a mistake. I ordered the exact same thing twice in my kind of speed to get that order in. So we canceled a few of those orders. We had a small number, a little bit of inventory, and we did hear some people say that they were away this past weekend, or that it fell on an off period for them where they just weren't able to make the purchase that they wanted to make. So with those cancellations, we also dipped into the stock that we had set aside for shows. We still do have some for shows, not as much, but we pulled some of that as well. So this coming Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern, we are going to drop a small number of Red Death figures and a small number of the mugs back on storehorseman.com. So anyone who missed out, if you're hearing Eric and I talk about this tonight and you're saying, wow, you know what? I wish I would have grabbed one. That's going to be your chance to do so. Your chance to grab that mug and this figure. It's going to do my job, make that announcement, Eric.
That's good. No, I think that's, it worked. It was not, not the plan, but it worked out well. Yeah. Where we got that little batch that we can put up. So, it's cool that some people that I'm sure, missed it for one reason or the other will have a shot to pick it up. Yeah. So
it's tough. And I've said this before, but there's no perfect time to drop any of this. It's ironically, we were originally supposed to drop it this coming week. We were going to drop it on the 30th. And the reason we moved it up a week was for very practical, logistical reasons. All of this stuff is in the warehouse right now, so it's taking up a lot of room, and we need to make some room for other stuff coming in. So that's a very real situation. But just giving us an extra week to ship this stuff, that proved to be helpful as well. And I mean, the shipping team is absolutely killing it. That's one of the things that I'm loving seeing is we did a drop on Saturday. I mean, we teased it on Friday, drop on Saturday. Shipping started, immediately. They started printing out labels and stuff over the weekend. Monday morning, they were off and running, and boxes actually started shipping on Monday. I'm already seeing photographers and reviewers and everybody start sharing photos and videos of their unboxing of this particular figure. Dorkly, I mentioned earlier, to go from a reveal of a brand new figure to having it in hand within a few days in this day and age is just absolutely amazing. And I think it's yet another example of how Figura Obscura drops hit a little bit differently.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's that, for us, the excitement continues past the drop. The office is still, buzzing. Just a buzzing. Yeah.
Yeah. Ryan over here is saying, I got mine this morning in the UK.
Wow.
So that Red Death went all the way from New Jersey to the UK in literally a couple days.
That is, how cool is that?
That is very, very cool.
I have to say, looking at that picture you have up, though, that there's, major credit to Trevor there. Like, he can take a picture of a box and make it look that cool. I mean, that is, it really is, some of the coolest product photography I've ever seen.
I love that too. I love the fact that, and this is not a shot at anybody else, but the fact that all of our stuff is physical, that everything, when Trevor jokingly says he loves Figura Obscura because he's shooting production pieces. He's not dealing with prototypes. But I love the fact, because it's important to us that everything that we show is a production. If it's not production, it's a prototype. It's an actual physical piece that's been printed and painted and photographed, so fans are seeing kind of what they're going to get.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's it's a different level of work to do it that way, and timing and all that other stuff. But I mean, just because of the way we've built the business and set ourselves up, and we do have the luxury of being able to to work that way. For some people, it's not even an option. So certainly feel lucky to be able to do that.
We are. So two of the pieces of Nate art that I'm hearing a lot of people comment on. Obviously, one of them is, the inside panel here, the masquerade that we had talked about, when when Nate did this, one thing he wanted to do was actually show the windows and show these different, masquerade revelers. We've already talked about the fact that he based them on the 7 deadly sins. So that's kind of fun. So I'm hearing a lot of people ask about that and say they love figures from that. But the other piece of art that people seem to really be enjoying is this one here, which is one of my favorite panels. It's on the back of the box on the inside of the package, so it kind of almost like goes under the radar. But this particular piece with the Abbey in the background with the windows and the Plague Doctor in front, I think just looks great. And this particular shot on screen is actually one of the pages from the mini comic that it comes with.
I love that shot. When I was in college and getting really into comics and drawing comics and stuff like that at the time, a book that came out that I absolutely loved was Mike Mignola did a comic adaptation of Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula.
Okay.
And the artwork in it was just gorgeous, because it was this interesting version of Mignola where he was doing his style, but he was also representing, a filmed movie. So it had the style, but it was slightly, less stylized in a way. But I just some of the panels, it was particularly where it was the horse and carriage, like on the cliffs and the winding road and stuff like that. The way that he just would break it down to these silhouettes and shapes were just so cool. And this has the same quality of that. Whereas I just love that entire horse and carriage is, there's just enough hint of detail where you can see detail there, but it's very mysterious. And then there's actually more detail in the background than the foreground. So it's just very foreboding, moody. Just and again, you get a little different than what you see from Nate on a lot of pieces that we're more familiar with from him. So really, really just a neat piece.
It is. And for me, so I was able, the page layouts in the mini comic, I put those together. And that was an absolute blast for me to do, because to be able to take Nate's artwork, Nate does all this work. For people that don't know, Nate does all of this art in like Photoshop. So he sends me a layered Photoshop file, which is an absolute joy for me to pick apart, because he's so clean. Like, all of his layers are named so perfectly. He's the exact opposite of what I'm like in Photoshop. I'm horrible in Photoshop. Like, I used to get reprimanded for it all the time because it was just like layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, nothing named. I'm horrible. Nate is so clean and so just meticulous. So to pull that stuff apart and look at all the component pieces and figure out how it could be repurposed for the comic, like, which panels go with which blocks of text. That was so enjoyable to do. So to lay out a page like this, where you've got one page this is actually the first page of the book. You got the beginning of the story, and then just on the opposite page, you've got such a striking scene. I'm going to remember this particular drop because of how much fun I had doing this book.
It is. I mean, doing layout work and design, it's just so much more of a pleasure when the assets are, at the level of what Nate puts together. It makes it, you're not filling in any blanks or making up for anything that's lacking. You just dropping it in and enjoying the show.
So I do want to point this out, because I felt like this skated under the radar, and I want to. So this is one of the shots that Trevor did. So we've got the clock that's in the foreground. So Chris today, when we were talking about doing the show tonight, he didn't want to cue George into what was happening. So we couldn't make the cover of the broadcast the happy anniversary. So that's why we said it was a celebration of the Red Death. So I said, well, I'll take one of the Red Death photos and I'll put a party hat on it. And he said, okay, well, that's great. So I did that. I put the party hat on this particular photo, but I also photoshopped the clock to be a little bit past 4 o'clock. It's just one of those little things. I spent time on this, so I want everyone to enjoy that little bit of silliness there.
That's funny.
Yeah, I like that. And even using some of these images. So here's another wonderful shot. Like, I ended up using this shot right when we did the second drop, and it was like, the time is, now for the second, availability. Even just being able to play off some of these images with that clock was an absolute joy. And the clock was what we did for the teaser, and that actually generated a whole bunch of really interesting guesses. There were a few people that guessed Masque of the Red Death, but a lot of people, it's amazing how many other types of characters or, literature clocks play a role in. People were really digging in to that, the different stories that involve a clock in one way or another.
Yeah, no, it's like I said at the top of the show, it's fun to see those speculations, because there's stuff comes up that hasn't crossed any of our minds yet, and then sometimes you see ones that are exactly things that are strong contenders. So you I don't know, you never know. You never know.
I got asked this weekend in one of the interviews if we ever add things to our list based on people's suggestions. And I said, it's happened, but the list is long. Like, there's a lot of great stuff on there. So because there are some suggestions that we wouldn't do. There are some that are just not right for Figura Obscura or for Four Horsemen Studios. There's plenty of them that people suggest that are already on the list, but it's definitely happened that you see someone make a guess or make a request, and you're like, that's a cool idea. Put that on the list. So yes, we do see those guesses. We do see those requests, and they definitely from time to time have influenced the options that are on our list of considerations.
Yep.
So we've got about 15 minutes left or so. I'd love to turn it over to the audience to see if you have any questions for Eric or myself about Figura Obscura, about Masque of the Red Death. Obviously, we can't tell you when the next one's coming, or we certainly can't tell you what it is. But if you want to know more about process or anything like that, or certainly anything about Red Death, hit us up in the comments, and we will do our best to answer you. Go back to this shot because this is one of my absolute favorites.
One of the things I like about this one is that there's like some very like classical pictures of like characters like death and like time and stuff like that, where they show the robe skeleton, and it's like a very like twisted looking version of the body, like a thin twisted body in this photograph. The way he is in the package, like it reminds me of that. So it's a lot of movement inside of, in a static package shot.
Yep. So Braku is saying, thanks for keeping what's under the mask a secret. So that is one thing that we haven't shown. We haven't shown. I mean, the mask is removable. We haven't shown what's under it. And that's always a tough call, because we don't want to build it up to be like it's cool, but we don't want to build it up to be bigger than it is. We had the same thing with, the surprise that was in Santa's sack. It gets built up so much, but that sense of there's a bit of a surprise, because there's so much of an element of surprise with Figura, adding it even after the purchase when you get it in hand. It's cool when you can do that. Not every release can do that. We didn't do it with Monkey, but when you do have the ability to do that, it is kind of fun for sure.
Absolutely. I'm seeing a couple of questions there.
Yeah,
about the pattern on the mask.
Yeah, what inspired your design of the mask? That's one. Trevor also said, was there an inspiration for the pattern on the mask? So why don't you talk a little bit about the mask itself, and I'll bring up this shot here that actually shows more of a close-up.
So really the mask was, a combination of just what the text was, spoke of, and not betraying that in any way, and trying to embrace that, but do something figurally interesting. So the two kind of inspirations that I played with that is, one is the pattern, like in the forehead, and I guess really the whole upper part of the mask was inspired by the clock. So it was a matter of wanting to be able to create a relationship between the mask itself and the clock. And then of course this idea of the characters in the story are running out of time. Time is often associated with death. It's the ticking clock, and again, going back to that dread of the story and just this, I don't know, there's a claustrophobia and just like, just anxiety building, in the the idea of the clock striking was such a big part of that. And so that was a big part of it. And then just the idea again of this like dripping blood, like almost like, because it's a plague, and so like the idea of like certain diseases where people bleed out of their eyes, or like spontaneously bleeding, just this kind of, it's this, it is this representation of bleeding and the dripping of blood, but it is again like frozen in time. So I don't know, just the kind of like it all related well together, and then it just, of course, like just like visually, all of that came together to make a unique piece, and because I didn't want to just put like a skull on there, which is kind of more what they describe in the book. But again, it's a matter of like doing something and giving it like a little bit of a flair, but still remaining true to the story.
Absolutely. So I like this one from Big Dub. It says, do you have more or different excitement levels for Figura drops versus Legion reveals? I'll jump in on that first, and then you can comment. I love them both for different reasons, I would say. Obviously, as we already talked about, the event style aspect of Figura Obscura drop weekend is a ton of fun. Going from, reveal, like teaser Friday, into the reveals on Saturday, and all the excitement and the fact that the entire community is collectively talking about it. It's every live stream, everyone is, and then it starts showing up on all the different toy podcasts and stuff. So there's something about that excitement. Additionally, because it's a single figure, it's very focused. Everyone's talking about that particular figure, as opposed to a wave where there's a variety of figures, and someone likes the Thraxian the best, someone likes the Ox Crew armor the best, just thinking about the most recent wave. So that focus, I think, is really special. But again, on the flip side, I love the variety. I love, Eric, when you and I talk about a wave and how we're going to reveal it. The order that we use is very deliberate. With Ox Crew, the way we told that story was very, very deliberate. So I would answer that question that I love them both for different reasons, because they provide a different kind of, communication opportunity and excitement opportunity, whether we're doing Mythic or Cosmic big waves or those single Figura drops.
Yeah, I mean, I echo very much what you're saying there, and I think maybe a good analogy for it is, if you're talking about like entertainment, you're interpreting a story. There's the option of making a motion picture. There's the option of making a television series. They can both be great. They can both be perfect for the material, and the impact can be great on both. And I think, like, to me, there's a lot of parallels there, because, again, keeps talking about, the figure is an event figure. It's more like the movie. It's more like, there you got 2 hours to tell the story, do everything you need to do. Whereas, and I love on a television series, if you've got 10 hours to explore the world and explore a giant cast of characters, that's fantastic as well. So here, all the focus is on the one character. Whereas, again, you mentioned Ox Crew, like that, it's about a group of characters and how their story folds out. So there's real positives to both. And then even, I mean, as far as the reveal, I mean, even like waves, there's different ways to reveal it. There, you know, we did the one All-Stars wave where we had different, different influencers each take a reveal, or even PowerCon is different than Legion's Con/G-Con versus just an online, an online reveal special. So, you know, there's something to be found in every one.
Sure. So I was talking to someone this weekend, and I think you'll appreciate this analogy, where they were saying, you know, I love the pre-orders. I love that model because I know that I don't have to stress out about it, and I can order it when I need to order it, and I know I'm going to get it. I'm guaranteed it. And they compared that to like the way we watch and stream a lot of TV these days, where, you know, you watch it when it's available, you know, it's available at a certain time. Watch it when it's convenient for you. But they were comparing, you know, that type of viewing to what you and I grew up with, where that like event viewing. You know, you and I have talked about Rankin Bass holiday specials, and how when, you know, one of those shows was on, you had to be in front of the TV at that moment. And that was a collective viewing experience. Everyone who was watching, you know, It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, was sitting down and doing that at the same time. Figura Obscura feels like that. It's an event viewing where at 9 o'clock on that Saturday, you are on Four Horsemen, you are refreshing, and then it goes live, and that's when you get to see it. I loved that analogy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and again, they're both
great.
They're both valid and both great. So, you know, it's great to, you know, live in a world where you can experience things multiple ways.
Comment here saying, do you ever sculpt something and think maybe this is too gnarly for the public? I've never heard you use the word gnarly, so.
Not really, because I don't feel like we do like anything that's really gratuitous. Like, you know, I feel like nothing is like for the sake of shock value or whatever. I do like, I think more, it's like sometimes I feel like I'm concerned like something might be either too obscure or too weird, certainly within the world of cosmic. But, you know, that even with Figura, there's certain things that, you know, that I'm interested in and would like to do that, that's more my concern. It's less that it's like, you know, too gnarly or offensive or anything like that. And just more that it's not relatable.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the idea is to share this stuff and, you know, to bring somebody some joy, you know. So if it doesn't hit with somebody, then, you know, that's what we're hoping doesn't happen.
Yeah. We also talk, I mean, this isn't giving anything away, but not only are we not trying to do things for shock value, we are very sensitive to certain things. You know, Figura Obscura draws from literature and holiday traditions and world cultures and, you know, all these different things, mythology. And, you know, we've had conversations as we go through that list about, you know, different designs or concepts, making sure that it's not something that would be, you know, unintentionally offensive, you know, to certain people. So I think that, you know, those are the types of things that we probably worry about more than something being too gnarly.
Yeah.
Has an original concept for a figure started off in one line and then been produced for another line? So have you ever started something, or, you know, thought that something was going to end up in Mythic first and it went to Cosmic, or vice versa, or anything like that?
Yes. I'm sure it's happened a few times. And Figura is an interesting space for this, and certain stuff I can't talk about yet, but there's some pretty perfect examples. But I can talk about it is a good example of it, is the Sun Wukong. I think when we did this talk for that, like, way back, I started one, and it was more of like a barbaric warrior, kind of like mishmash of style, cultural styles and armors and things like that. And it would, probably would have been part of Mythic at the time.
Yep.
Whereas now with the platform of Figura, we were, able to dive into the history and the tradition, and what type of a monkey was being referenced, what type of armor he'd be wearing, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a great example of where it was more at home in Figura and made a lot more sense in Figura, even though it's a character that could easily go into Mythic. And I think that's part of finding what the objective with Figura is that, we could still do a monkey warrior figure at some point in Mythic, but those real world touch points and kind of respect for the source material doesn't necessarily need to be there. So we'd probably take a lot more liberty with it and do something much more fantastical than what was done here. So yes, I mean, it definitely does happen. Concepts can definitely bounce around.
I brought a comment up a minute ago from Bill at Dorclair thanking us for involving him in these Figura drops. A huge part of these drops for us, something that we started back with the Headless Horseman, where we sent Bill a figure early and he did a review. We got such wonderful feedback from people saying they appreciated being able to see an in-hand actual look at all aspects of that figure while the purchase was available. Because so often by the time reviewers get something in hand, they're no longer available. So that's something we continued, of course, with Father Christmas and Monkey King, and then now with Red Death. So thank you very much, Bill, for doing that. Anyone who hasn't seen that review, I've got Dorclair's, Bill's link to his YouTube on the page right now, on the screen right now. Go check that video out because it is definitely worth seeing.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. Even after looking at this thing for a year, watching Bill, review it and unbox it and everything, like it's like seeing it for the first time. Yeah. So it is really cool, and it just it's just a great, it gives a great perspective.
It's part of it. I love this question. For you, is Figura Obscura almost like a palette cleanser between the other two lines? And I happen to know that, these end up getting slotted between some major other sculpting projects you're doing for Mythic and Cosmic. But do you kind of feel like that these are a bit of a breath of fresh air from when you lift your head up from Mythic and Cosmic?
Yeah. I mean, I've even discussed before, like even the jumping between Mythic and Cosmic, I enjoy a lot as well. I like the switching gears because it keeps everything fresh. In the case of Figura, there's like, there's some rules established with it that I don't have to abide by on the other two waves, which sometimes having those parameters, forces creativity in different ways. So that part of it's fun. The familiarity of the subject material, that's enjoyable as well. So yeah, I mean, it is, there's just a nice change of pace. It's different subject matter sometimes. Like, this character could easily have fit into the Necronominus wave.
Yes.
But Monkey really doesn't, like, he could have fit into Mythic, but again, if he would have been in Mythic, it would have been a different character.
Yep.
So it is a great, a great break and change of direction.
Okay. So we're getting close to the end here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. Thank you for all your support this weekend with this Figura Obscura drop. As I mentioned, we do have another small amount that will be hitting Four Horsemen this coming Friday. That's the 29th, September 29th at 9 a.m. Speaking of Dorklear, he did this comment earlier as we're talking about literature for the holiday season. He said, random book recommendation. If anyone is looking for some more amazing Halloween season reading, pick up the short story collection, The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. So that's a recommendation. A recommendation that I will give, I'm curious, Eric, if you've ever read, one of my favorite seasonal stories that I reread every single Halloween is The Halloween Tree by Ray Bradbury. You ever read that one?
No.
Love that one. It kind of tells, I mean, it's very much a Ray Bradbury story, but it tells the kind of the history of the Halloween season through a bunch of kids who travel through the ages and experience the different traditions that led to Halloween. And they go to ancient Egypt, they go to, the Stonehenge, the building of Notre Dame, all these wonderful type places, Mexico during the Day of the Dead. So I like that one a lot. And there was a Hanna-Barbera animated version of it that was narrated by Ray Bradbury with Leonard Nimoy playing like the main character who takes the kids on their tour.
Wow. That sounds cool.
It's absolutely very cool. I think, especially the Hanna-Barbera presentation, I think you'd enjoy it very much.
Nice.
Eric, thank you as well for coming on and spending some time with us. As I said at the start, as if I needed anything else to make me love Figura Obscura drops, getting to hang out with you for 90 minutes and talk about them is just that cherry on top, I guess.
Absolutely. No, it's always a lot of fun, especially after we geek out over this stuff internally and spend, so much time, researching it and all that. Like it's fun to just, get out there and share some of that process behind it.
Absolutely. So everybody, thank you all very much for tonight. Thank you for your support. We will see you all next week. Eric, I'll talk to you in a bit. We'll stay in the green room. We'll do the little outro music, and then we get to talk off camera.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Have a good night, everyone.
Take care, everybody.